Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Office Hours. My name is Salma, if you don't know me, and I'm joined by Jacob today, who's going to share his vision for the new style variables experience in Nordcraft. And it's going to sound so exciting. I can't wait for it to be there. Hi, Jacob. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you.
Good. How's the weather? That's what we have to ask, isn't it?
This is very close to the warmest day we ever had in Denmark, which is
Oh,
so I'm just staying in the shade as much as I can.
good plan. Good plan. Good. Here it was very hot last week, but it's kind of normal now for this time of year, which is probably better for everyone. Right, so let's talk about it. Style variables, overriding styles on components, animating and transitioning variables. What have you got for us?
Yes. Here we go.
Oh,
My screen is sharing, right?
yes.
Yes. So, style variables, and it's an interesting one because we already had style variables in Nordcraft. We had it for a while, and they've been great for what they were meant for at the time. Since then, the spec in the browsers have kind of moved on, and we now have this. We have a lot of opportunity to take it further. Unfortunately, our the structure we had picked did not match exactly to it, so we are doing a bit of changes. So it's going to be kind of a version 2 of style variable. It's going to be very easy to move from the previous one to the new one. But once you release this, any new style variable is going to use this new type. So one of the really interesting things about style variables is that you can now define in the browser what syntax they have. Syntax just means the type. So a color is a color, and a length unit, it will be like 10 pixels and 20 pixels, or something like that. The idea is when you define what they are, the browser can much better work with them, especially if you start to, if you want to multiply two things. If it doesn't know what type it is, it doesn't really know how to do it. That's one part of it. The other part is that the browser will now be able to transition properties, and it will be able to animate them as well, kind of the same thing. So if you say, if you take you can transition most properties. You can transition a font color, for example, because the browser knows this is a color, we want to move to another color. But if you take a property, it doesn't really know what is this. You can use it in context, but it doesn't really know what it is. Now it does. So if you say, I want to transition this style property from 10 pixels to 5%, it now understands that this is a length thing, and it should try to kind of calculate in between, interpolate what's in between. That's part of it. There's a lot more to it, because now that we're working with it, we might as well take it just a little bit further. So, as always,
The duck is back.
Yes, my test project is always the duck. When I'm working with animation transition, it's usually the duck end of it. So you can see here I'm on my local host. That's because this is not live. This is probably the most work in progress thing I have shown in these office hours. I've been here a few times. Usually it's closer to release. This one is probably not that far from release, but it's still a pretty rough state. But you can
Is
see
there
out here.
any chance you could move the preview of me from the corner of your screen? There we go.
There you go.
Thank you. Oh, and zoom in a little bit, please. Zoom in.
Zoom in a little bit. Yes. Let me zoom in a bit. My keyboard doesn't want to do it right now. Here. Bum bum.
Perfect. Thank
Here we go. Okay. We have our doc as usual. But you might notice this new part here. So style variables, you already had them. Usually they're just an input field with a formula button, so you can set them to a formula. You can still do that. You can still set them to a formula, but now you notice that they actually have a different type. So for example, colors now have a little color input. So this alone is quite nice. And that's because when I defined this style variable, I defined it as a syntax color, and these syntaxes are the same thing the browser understands. So before we had these, I think we call them categories, something we came up with by ourselves, and the only reason we had this category is to say, when you had these ones, what should they show up? And should they show up in when you pick a size thing here, or what should they bind to. Now we use the official syntax, which means when I define a feed color, which is a color, I can now get a color picker. So you can see when I change this, the feed actually changes. And that's quite interesting because this here, I'm on the root element. So I've just set on these, the foot and I guess this is the leg and this is the foot. I have set their background to be this variable. You could kind of do that before. Not too interesting, but the interesting part, you actually have a color picker now. But a really nice thing is that if I go somewhere where I use this duck, for example, my home page right here, I now have access to the same one. So it automatically knows that these style variables exist on it. And that means like package authors, for example, they can decide what do they want to expose out. So if you set something in the root element, it's going to show here. So for example, this beak open I have set, so you can see right now it's closed. And if I put 1, it open a bit, and 0.5. So I bound this to the beak of the little bird and to whatever. Yes. Now it's a bit sad. So that's really cool. So now you can control this mouse. So I could make this bird, and I could put some default colors, and then I could expose these things. So, okay, bird color, what should it be? And I can change the color of the little foot here.
And how would you expose those things in particular in a package, for example?
You would do the same. You would just have this component, and on the root element, you would just create these style variables. I'll just click here, create a new style variable, call it test. And this is a, let's say it's an angle. And then when we go back to this one, and I have it here, I now have this testing, and I can write, it knows that it's an angle, so now I can write 360 degrees.
So
if anyone did that in
go on.
No, if you have questions, please ask.
I was going to say, so it works a little bit like component attributes in a way, because as soon as you add an attribute into the component, it's available on the outside.
Exactly. So normally, if you wanted to expose this thing, you would do it through attributes. The nice part here is you actually get the styles, and you don't have to bind these to formulas. Most of the time, I don't think you would. I think you would keep everything kind of static. But there's some other really cool things, because once you have defined these ones with their type, the syntax, the browser now knows this is a color, which means you can transition them and you can also animate them. So if I go into my doc here, I create an animation. We now have access to these things. So if I, for example, at the 0.2 second mark, say the beak should be closed, and maybe over here, I say the beak should be really open, we can now animate these ones. And this is something we have not seen before, because this means that I have one animation on one component, but I'm controlling an element deep within this one. So this one is all the way down at the beak here. This one, right? So I can now create an animation. As long as I set these variables up, I can now make one animation where I animate very complex things. So I could have here, we could say, okay, the beak should open, close. We also want this duck to, maybe we want the feet to turn blue because it's getting cold. So over here, we just say, as the animation plays, the feet now turn blue. So you can expose these, you can set it up, you can kind of create very complex animations now in one go. And just like a very simple example here, we have another one where I just have like the box A left, box B left, and then this one I bound it to the left, box A left, and this one is box B left. And that means on this animation here, I can now control both boxes in one animation. So because we now get a lot of extra help here, and we want to make it really easy to create new star variables, you probably want to make it so you can create them directly from each input here. I think it's going to be much more normal, at least in my workflow, to use style variables for almost anything that needs to move around, be easily changed. Because instead of having setting the same color 3 places, and you can just set it 1 place and control it.
I feel like it opens a lot of possibilities for people who are building packages, for example, and if they're building like fun animations or those kinds of things, rather than everyone who installs that package getting the same experience, then the user who installs it can easily like tweak it and make it more appropriate for their use case without having to go deep into it, and without the package maintainer having to fiddle with attributes all over the place.
Yes. Yeah. So it plays perfectly into the whole composition and composition of what you do in Nordcraft. And styles and attributes are generally different. Right now you have to use attributes to set styles, but oftentimes attributes should be more about the logic. The look of it happens in the style. So in the styles, it's more about how does something look, how does it show on the screen. An attribute is more about the logic. What content should there be shown, or what should it fetch? So
I feel like I
style
want to
variables are.
go on.
Yeah. No, you go.
I feel like I want to rebuild my like button now that I made, that package, because that has too many attributes that configure the size of things and how it's animated and how many hearts there are. I mean, that one sounds like an attribute, but I feel like that would simplify that experience of using that package a lot.
Yes. Yes.
We do have a question from Eric in the chat. If you bind a style variable to a formula, will that affect performance negatively compared to an animation?
Yes, it would. I mean, yes, it would. I can't explain exactly how, but there's a lot of performance optimization that browsers can do if you stick to style variables. So if you set a transition, for example, animation, the browser could, in theory, send everything down to the GPU. The exact I don't know if they do it, but they could. Some browser implementation might do it. So they send everything in one go. So there's no overhead. You get it down to the GPU, and then it can render everything from there. If you bind it to a formula, every time that formula changes, you would update the style variable, which is super fast, but it's not as fast. You could definitely do it. I don't think in most cases you would not notice a huge difference, but transitions and animations in CSS are as fast as they get. That's the idea. But you could, absolutely. You can bind this and you can update it 60 times a second, so it will not be an issue. If you do it too many places, some people's phone might start to get a little bit warmer than they need to.
But that sounds like something that you would do if you want to change something that quickly. You'd want to just do an animation for that anyway, wouldn't you? I mean, I guess sometimes it might be based on like streamed data or something, or the time.
Yeah.
But as we know, we can make a CSS only clock anyway without JavaScript. So maybe you wouldn't need such things.
Yes. I mean, you can do here, if you want to, you can create an animation where you kind of know how it is. So you can bind multiple things, and then you could set the position of that animation. You control that with a formula as well. So if I create a style variable for the delay and make it a negative number, it's a very weird pattern. You can actually kind of control what I'm doing here. You can control with a formula where on the timeline the animation is. And you can update that 60 times a second. That's only one call to the, one call that has to go through potentially to the GPU, and then that can control everything else. But style variables are very fast. They can just take a little while to set. So once you set them, it propagates very quickly.
Have you noticed that your duck package still says toddle package?
Uh-oh.
You probably don't even read it anymore. So I've got two questions for you. What in doing this have you learned about the browser, CSS? What bits of wisdom might you have to impart on the viewers?
That they tend to get, I feel like the CSS spec tend to get things wrong quite often. So for example, when you define properties here, there's something I left out, but it's quite important. When you name something, if I name something break open, for example, I set a number, this is globally defined because CSS doesn't have a way to scope definitions. So if I name this one break open as a number and somewhere else peak open and another place set a length, you're gonna have a clash between types. It doesn't know which one to use, which is something we have to fix with tooling. But I'm almost certain then in 2 or 3 years the CSS spec will improve, and we will actually have the possibility to set these things in a different way. We don't have to find them globally, because globally setting something is almost never the right solution.
So these are all using the app properties syntax and not the general custom properties that you use in CSS. So because you were just talking about scoping, and obviously you can scope custom properties inside classes, etc. But you're saying that this app property syntax, everything's global.
The definition, yes, of this one, which is annoying because that's not really what we want. And there is some there are special places in CSS where you can actually do it locally, but it's moving quite slow. Eventually, it's going to end up in something different, I'm sure. But it's interesting to look into also how we set style variables if you don't do it in an efficient way. If you have to update style sheets or something, it's quite slow. But it's interesting to follow how do they make it so fast. So when you update a property, everything is kind of linked together. This property, wherever it's used, knows exactly where it's defined. So when you update it, it propagates super fast. So the CSS engine, CSS is ridiculously fast and very well optimized for this exact way we're doing it. So I don't see any issue with like using 20, 30 CSS variables and transition them and mating them. It's going to be very fast no matter what.
Can I see the CSS panel for that? Is it just raw still, or are you doing anything funky?
I don't think you see it here. It probably should show up
there.
maybe in a separate view. I'm not sure. It's kind of defined in a different way because it's not part of the class. Maybe I haven't gotten that far. We will figure it out.
Separate area might be more.
I guess you should actually
clear.
be able to. I think if you do it on animations, you actually do see it. So here, you can see we do see them here. So yeah, they should show up. They're not showing up today. And that's because we're setting them in a very different way than other properties. Because, surprise, surprise, they're the only one that are potentially dynamic because they can be set to a formula. So their value, it's a bit like what would you show in here? You would show you would show tests, and then if it's static, you would show 360 degrees. But if it's a formula, you would show what it is now maybe. Or but they're a little bit different. We didn't show the style variables before either. I'm not sure. We'll figure it out.
So does this completely replace the existing functionality, or is it alongside it? Because do you think there still might be a use case for wanting to define custom properties, style variables inside a class or something, and not making it global?
No. It's only the definition that is global. It's only this name and angle. That's the global part. We will probably give you a free definition where it doesn't define a specific thing, and then you can use it wherever. You can still use this whatever. The definition itself, it's very complicated. It's very weird. But there's this add property.
Yeah.
So when you add these ones, behind the scene, what happens is that they are defined in CSS like this. But you can see the name here. This is this name of the variable. So this is what we see here. And that gets a syntax that you define. If you define that with different syntaxes, then if you define this multiple times, it's just going to use the first one or the second one. I don't actually remember. I think it's the first one it's going to use in that case.
Interesting. So it doesn't cascade like normal CSS.
Maybe it's the second one. I don't know, but it's an issue. Like you should not, and it's quite another benefit in my world. It's a benefit if I set this as an angle, and I try to write 10 pixels. It's not going to do anything. It's going to be set to 10 pixels, but it's just going to say this is not the correct type, so it skips it, and whatever value it was before, it's going to use. And this might seem annoying, but it's actually a kind of type checking, which is something we definitely want to move towards in Nordcraft, as much type check as we can possibly get, so you guarantee that this value is of the type that you have set it to be.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. My second question, even though I've asked more questions in between, was going to be, is there anything that you've got in your brain or on the roadmap for this that you haven't shown us today?
Around this, I think it's just a lot of tooling around this is the next step. And also, this is very rough. It's going to change a lot before we get it out. I think the really powerful part of this, the one that kind of kickstarted, we knew we wanted to do this for a while, but the one that really kickstarted is that you can now, with this, you can animate very complex things. You can make an entire page, so you can, these pages where you scroll through and things move in from the left and right. You can define that whole thing as a single animation if you want to. I probably wouldn't do that, but this idea of moving things around, you could even have SVG paths, so you have something that draws on the screen based on these style variables as well. You can do pretty much anything once we have this in with the animation. You can animate anything, where today you are pretty limited to one element, and you have to do the property itself. I think a big part of this as well when we get there is, for example, in this duck, you can see it's interesting that I define the beak open as a number. This is actually a number, but it's animating some kind of rotation. When I move this up, it's kind of rotating. And I cheated a bit because I set the lower beak here, I set it to a calculate. So it takes this beak open times 30 degrees. So it takes whatever number is here in the and this is something that lives in CSS. And this is a quite obvious next task around CSS variables. That's that we can start to use CSS functions. And then within those functions, say I want to calculate this one times something else. If it's number, you can probably multiply by anything. But if this was a degree, you would only be able to multiply it by, I guess, other degrees or numbers. So we can build like an interface for calculate. This is very early
excited
days.
about that.
That's going to be really cool.
Wait. Yeah.
And there's a lot of other interesting functions there. There's even like an if, I think they introduced last year in CSS spec. Very weird, but
yes,
potentially some use cases there.
Yeah.
We
do have another
you can really
question.
start to do crazy things. Because then you can really start to do your spec, like what you expose here. This makes more sense to me, beak open, than having to like put in degrees myself.
Yeah.
So you can have expose not only the properties you want out, but actually like an abstraction or a mapping of those properties to something that makes more sense to
more
to
semantic naming of your variables.
Yes, and this one could do more things. I say when the beak opens, is not just the lower beak, like that might go down, but maybe the upper beak will also move up a little bit, and you can use calculate for that. So you can one property can certainly animate multiple things. So you can.
It does seem very powerful then to do that just from one place, because I think one of the things that I felt that's held me back on animations, like more complex animations, is the fact that you have to go into every single thing. If you want to use variables and custom things and you want to animate those, like you have to keep track of potentially so many different things. But if you set it up correctly and if you use those new style variables, I think it's going to be going to get people really going on that. Exactly,
because when I animate this duck, in here I'm animating each one individually, right? So this one has like, it was a bad time right now, so I have to wait on. I think we have to reset the animation maybe. But here I'm just seeing this one thing.
Yeah.
I don't really see how is it compared to the other thing, because it's different animation. They might have different duration. You can never really play them together. But if you define it as a single animation, then when I move the timeline, everything would move around and I'll be able to animate that one thing.
Nordcraft's going to become a multimedia engine.
Yes.
Talking of more questions, we've got one more question in the chat. This is a hot topic, I think, in the web development community at the moment about scroll-driven animations. Do we have an ETA on it, and is browser support ready soon? I guess we need to look at some Googling about that. I don't know when it's going to be released for everything.
Yes. It will come. Like as soon as it's widely available in all browsers, we will use the implementation. I think we have actually tried to like set it up ourselves. You can kind of get it working by modifying these CSS properties here. You can look at the specs and just put it in here. You can get it working, but it won't work in some browsers. I think that's a general thing. We wait until it's widely available. Otherwise, we end up with some features that suddenly get abandoned, and then we have to support them, and no one really uses them anymore. It happened quite often that one of the big browser vendors last minute doesn't want to do something, and then we're stuck with it. So once
Yeah.
everyone is, it could be this year. I think it's a very small implementation from our side.
Because people have been talking about it since 2023. So I'm sure it's coming soon. Surely.
Probably. It is.
Surely.
It's in the next Safari version. It's already there. It's in the preview. I think once that in, then there is basically enough support that we can look into. But yes, scroll-driven animation is going to be really nice for this. Then the duck can move across the screen as you scroll, which would be really really cool.
You need to just sneak in the duck on the Nordcraft homepage.
Maybe.
On the canvas. You know, when you show me the big picture, just needs to walk across there. If Casper, you're listening, you know what to do. Oh, there's another demo.
Yeah, this is me testing. This is how it looks when you test features. But yeah, it's the same thing. That's much to show. Again, like a variable being exposed by a component, and you can change it from outside. That's and an animation to change it, I guess.
Can't wait. Can't wait. This looks great. Thank you for teaching me about the new app property thing. I've seen it being talked about, but I hadn't had one of those moments to actually look into it. So it seems pretty interesting. And obviously with the CSS spec, pros and cons for some things, but things are always changing. And,
yes, it's a pretty large spec, but we're going to do everything we can to explain it. So for example, these syntax things, we will explain each syntax, what they do in the Nordcraft editor. You will get like a live description of what they do, so you know what to pick. And of course, each input is going to have a specific visual way to show it. We have the color and length now, but there'll be many more.
Oh, one other question. How does this fit in? Probably doesn't at all, with theme style variables and how they work and things like can you pick a theme variable as an initial value here for the app property style variables?
That's
or should you
question.
be able to?
I don't know the specifics there, but it's definitely going to play into themes. So again, if you look at the specs here of the property, you can see it has a syntax, it has a name. That's the only thing we are showing right now, name, syntax. But there are actually some more things here. That's whether it should inherit or not. An initial value. These things can only really live in one place. So these ones, yes, they're going to live in theme eventually. So you define them here, but you'll be able to see all of your properties defined anywhere in the theme. You can set initial values, and there are all the other properties we have in the theme, all the length units you define, they should also be defined the same way. So you have the syntax for them. So yes, it's gonna play into theme. I think the theme thing is gonna have its own huge makeover.
Yes.
It's gonna be part of that.
Excellent.
But now, once again, we are closer to the CSS spec. That's sometimes you move a little bit away, but we always end up going back to the basics, because as soon as you start to abstract too much, you also lose some power. So this way you have, it's like 1-to-1 with the CSS spec, which is very nice. That means you can do anything.
True story. True story. All right. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you. We're going to just give it, I guess, a couple of minutes to see if there are any further questions in the chat. Quick plug while I'm here, the Learn Nordcraft Lesson 4 video is now out. So you can build a multi-step form with validation and post it to Supabase. There's a starter project for you, so you don't have to start from scratch, because building the form, the accessible form with all of the stuff, is too much work for me to ask you to do. So I did it all for you. So you can go and check that out, go through the lessons, learn some stuff, and let me know what else you want to see as well. And I don't think we've got any more chats in the chat. So we can end this office hours on the half an hour mark, which doesn't seem too bad at all. I want to thank you very much, Jacob, for demoing that. I'm really excited. I'm really glad I saw it, because I'm very excited and I learned some stuff. So thank you for that. And so we're not going to have any office hours next week because me and Andreas are going on another trip to Sheffield in the United Kingdom. So we'll be back in 2 weeks, and hopefully we can learn some more, show off some more stuff, and see you there. Goodbye and have a great one.
Bye.